The struggling rancher found the abandoned bride sitting on the train platform, her wedding dress torn and muddy, clutching the carpetbag like it held her last hope. Steam hissed from the departing locomotive. The woman's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Ezekiel Thornfield stood 30 feet away, his own desperation a weight in his chest. The foreclosure notice crinkled in his coat pocket. 30 days, $800. The numbers might as well have been 8,000. The woman looked up. Her face was round and soft, nothing like the sharp-boned ladies who usually caught men's attention in Copper Creek. Tears had left tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Her carpetbag had split open, spilling letters across the wooden platform. The station master approached her, his voice carrying across the empty space. "Ma'am, you can't stay here. Next train's not till Thursday." "I have nowhere to go." Her voice was steady despite the tears. Eastern accent, educated. Zeke's boots found the platform before his mind caught up. The woman's eyes met his. Green as spring grass. Something in them reminded him of his own mirror that morning, the look of someone who'd run out of choices. "What happened?" The words came out rougher than he intended. She straightened her spine. "I was to marry Mr. Cornelius Whitman. He took one look at me and decided I wasn't what he ordered." The station master shook his head. "Shame, really. But you can't camp here, miss. Town's got rules." Zeke's hand found the $50 in his pocket, his last $50. Money he needed for winter feed. Money that wouldn't save his ranch anyway. The woman gathered her scattered letters. Her movements were precise, controlled, like she was holding herself together through sheer will. "Where will you go?" Zeke asked. "Boston, I suppose." "If they'll have me back." She didn't sound convinced they would. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. October in Montana Territory didn't give second chances. Neither did banks. Neither did life, most times. "Ma'am, I know this sounds peculiar," Zeke's voice caught, "but I need a wife. Ranch won't run itself, and I can't afford hired help." She stared at him. The station master's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "You're proposing to a complete stranger?" "Yes, ma'am." "I reckon we're both in tight spots." She studied his face. Whatever she saw there made her set down the letters. "What's your name?" "Ezekiel Thornfield. Most folks call me Zeke." "Magnolia." "Pearl Whitmore." She stood, brushing dirt from her ruined dress. "Are you a drinking man, Mr. Thornfield?" "No, ma'am." "Do you hit women?" "Never have. Never will." She nodded slowly. "I can cook, clean. I'm not afraid of hard work. That's more than I hoped for." The station master looked between them. "You're both touched in the head." Magnolia's chin lifted. "Perhaps. But we're also both stranded." She turned to Zeke. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Marriage. Today, if you're willing. We figure out the rest as we go." "Why today?" Zeke pulled out the foreclosure notice. The paper shook in his hands. "Because I'm about to lose everything I've got. Maybe together we can save something." Magnolia read the notice, her green eyes moving quickly across the lines. Most women couldn't read. She handed it back without comment. "Is there a preacher in this town?" "Yes, ma'am." "Reverend Hayes." "Then let's go see him." They walked through Copper Creek's dusty Main Street, an unlikely pair. Zeke in his worn work clothes, Magnolia in her torn wedding dress. Townspeople stared from doorways and windows. Whispers followed in their wake. The Reverend's house sat at the end of the street, small and weathered. Zeke knocked. Reverend Hayes opened the door, took one look at them, and stepped aside. "Come in." The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. Magnolia's voice was steady when she said her vows. Zeke's hands shook when he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "You may kiss the bride." They looked at each other. Strangers, bound by desperation and hope. Zeke leaned forward, pressed his lips gently to hers. She tasted like salt tears and possibility. The Reverend signed the papers. May God bless your union. Outside, the wind had picked up. Magnolia gathered her carpet bag, her only possession in the world. Zeke offered his arm. Ready to see your new home, Mrs. Thornfield? She took his arm. Her grip was firm, steady. Lead the way, husband. They climbed into Zeke's wagon, two desperate souls heading into an uncertain future. The horses pulled them away from town, toward the mountains and whatever waited there. Neither spoke during the ride. Words seemed insufficient for what they'd just done. The land stretched around them, vast and unforgiving. The same land that was about to slip through Zeke's fingers. Unless this woman beside him was the miracle he'd been praying for. The ranch house crouched against the mountainside, its roof patched with mismatched shingles. Paint peeled from the shutters in long strips. The porch sagged under the weight of too many harsh winters. Magnolia stepped down from the wagon, her torn wedding dress catching on a splinter. She didn't flinch. Her eyes swept across the broken fence posts, the empty corral, the barn with its gaping door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. It's not much, Zeke said. It's honest land. She picked up her carpet bag. That's more than some have. The front door stuck when Zeke pushed it. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of late afternoon light. The furniture was sparse but solid. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold ashes scattered on the hearth. Magnolia set down her bag and walked to the kitchen. She opened cupboards, checked the pump at the sink, ran her fingers along the scarred wooden table. Her movements were methodical, assessing. Water runs clean, Zeke offered. Well, never goes dry. She nodded, opened the last cupboard. 3 cans of beans. A sack of flour with weevils. Salt pork gone green at the edges. The silence stretched between them. Outside, wind rattled the loose shingles. I'll show you the barn. Zeke's voice was rough with shame. They walked across the yard. Each step kicked up dust that settled on Magnolia's ruined dress. She didn't seem to notice. The barn held 4 horses and 3 milk cows. Hay filled maybe a quarter of the loft. Tools hung on pegs, well maintained but few. Everything spoke of a man trying to hold together more than he could manage alone. A dark-skinned man emerged from one of the stalls, his hands gentle on a horse's bridle. He was tall, lean, with graying hair and steady eyes that had seen too much. Jeremiah Crow, Zeke said. My foreman. Jeremiah, this is my wife, Magnolia. Jeremiah's eyebrows lifted slightly, but his voice stayed level. Ma'am, Mr. Crow. Magnolia inclined her head with dignity. How many head of cattle we running? Zeke asked. 43 as of this morning. Jeremiah's tone carried weight. Down from 47 last week. Zeke's jaw tightened. Wolves? No tracks, no blood. They just vanish. Magnolia watched this exchange, her green eyes moving between the 2 men. She said nothing, but her attention sharpened. They walked back to the house as darkness crept across the mountains. Inside, Magnolia lit the oil lamps with steady hands. She found an apron hanging on a peg, tied it around her waist over the wedding dress. I'll make supper. She worked with the meager supplies, her movements efficient. The salt pork got scraped, clean and fried. Flour became biscuits in a Dutch oven. She found wild onions growing behind the house, added them to the beans. Zeke sat at the table, watching her navigate his kitchen as if she'd been there for years. She didn't ask where things were. She found them. When she set the plate before him, the food was better than anything he'd tasted in months. She'd made something from nothing, turned scraps into a meal that filled the empty spaces in his chest. You didn't eat, he said. I'm fine. But she was cutting the portions small, saving most for him. After supper, she cleared the dishes without being asked. Zeke built a fire in the fireplace. The flames threw shadows on the walls, made the house feel less hollow. Magnolia sat at the table with a pencil stub and paper torn from her carpet bag. She wrote numbers in neat columns, her lips pressed together in concentration. "What are you working on?" "Accounts." She didn't look up. Trying to understand the numbers, Zeke's chest tightened. "I keep the books in the desk." She found the ledger, spread it open beside her own paper. Her pencil moved quickly, checking figures, making notes. Her face grew still as stone. "These cattle counts don't match what Mr. Crow said." "What do you mean?" "According to this, you should have 62 head. He counted 43. Zeke leaned over her shoulder. Her hair smelled of train smoke, and something floral underneath. The numbers swam before his eyes. He'd never been good with figures. 19 missing in 2 months. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "That's not wolves." The fire crackled in the silence. Outside, coyotes called across the valley, their voices rising and falling in ancient songs. "Rustlers," Zeke said finally. "Someone who knows your land, your routines." Magnolia's pencil tapped against the paper. Someone with access. The implications hung between them. In this territory, cattle theft was more than crime. It was death by degrees, slow starvation, disguised as business. Magnolia closed the ledger, stacked her papers neatly. "I'll need to see the pastures tomorrow. Count the herd myself." "That's rough country." "I can ride." Of course she could. This woman who could read and cipher and turn scraps into sustenance. Who sat in his kitchen in a torn wedding dress and planned strategies for survival. "Why did you really leave Boston?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Her hands stilled on the papers. For a moment, the only sound was wind through the eaves. "My father died. Left everything to my stepmother. She decided I was too expensive to keep." Magnolia's voice stayed level, but her knuckles whitened. The marriage was her idea, one less mouth to feed. Zeke nodded. He understood being unwanted, expendable. The bank had made that clear enough. They prepared for bed with careful politeness. Magnolia took the small bedroom off the kitchen. Zeke climbed to the loft. Through the thin walls, he heard her moving around, the soft sounds of a woman settling into a strange place. He lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, his cattle grazed in pastures that might not be his much longer. Somewhere else, thieves planned their next move. But in the room below, a woman worked by lamplight, her pencil scratching against paper as she built defenses from numbers and determination. For the first time in months, Zeke allowed himself to hope. Magnolia found the foreclosure notice 3 days later, tucked between the pages of a seed catalog. The paper was soft from handling, creased where desperate fingers had folded and refolded it. 30 days had become 27. She set the notice on the kitchen table and waited. Zeke came in from the morning chores, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He saw the paper and stopped. His shoulders sagged. "You weren't going to tell me. Didn't see the point in worrying you. I'm your wife." The words came out harder than she intended. "Your problems are mine now." Zeke pulled off his hat, ran his fingers through his hair. $800 might as well be 8,000. "We don't have it. We might." Magnolia spread her own papers across the table. Numbers filled every line, calculations that had kept her awake for 3 nights. "If we can stop the cattle thefts, if we can get the herd to market, if—" Zeke's voice was flat as winter sky. "I've been watching the pastures, counting. We're losing 2 head every week, always from the north. Canyon." Her pencil tapped against the figures. "Someone knows our patterns. Could be anyone. Half the territory needs money. Or someone who wants this land for reasons that have nothing to do with cattle." Zeke studied her face. "What aren't you telling me?" Before she could answer, hoofbeats drummed across the yard. 3 riders approached, their horses sleek and well-fed. The man in front sat his saddle with the confidence of someone who owned more than he could count. Bartholomew Ashford dismounted like he owned the ground beneath his feet. His coat was fine wool, his boots polished leather. Behind him, two men with hard eyes and ready hands waited for orders. "Thornfield," Ashford's voice carried across the yard. "Heard you took yourself a wife." Zeke stepped onto the porch. Magnolia moved to stand beside him, still wearing her apron over the patched dress she'd sewn from old curtains. "Ashford." Zeke's greeting held no warmth. "Ma'am." Ashford touched his hat brim, but his eyes lingered too long on Magnolia's face. "Congratulations on your recent nuptials." The words crawled across the space between them. Magnolia lifted her chin, met his stare without flinching. "What do you want?" Zeke asked. "To make you an offer. $400 for your spread. Cash money, today. It's worth twice that. Not to the bank." Ashford's smile was winter. "Cold. Heard you're having difficulties. Cattle going missing. Hard to make payments when your herd keeps shrinking." Zeke's hands clenched at his sides. "We're not selling." "Think about it, Thornfield. $400 would set you up. Nice somewhere else. Somewhere easier." His eyes found Magnolia again. "Some land's too hard for certain folks to handle." The insult hung in the air between them. Magnolia's face remained calm, but her knuckles whitened where she gripped the porch rail. "We said no." Her voice cut through the tension. Ashford's eyebrows lifted. "Well now, the little wife has opinions. This little wife can read a property deed, can cipher the value of good water rights." Magnolia stepped forward. "Can tell the difference between a fair offer and highway robbery." One of Ashford's men shifted in his saddle. His hand drifted toward his gun belt. "Easy, boys." Ashford's tone stayed pleasant, but his eyes went flat. "Just trying to help some neighbors out of a tight spot." "We appreciate the concern," Zeke said, "but we'll manage. Will you now?" Ashford remounted, settled himself in the saddle. "Funny thing about managing. Sometimes a man bites off more than he can chew. Sometimes circumstances change." The threat was soft as silk, sharp as broken glass. "Sometimes they do." Magnolia's voice matched his tone. "Sometimes folks who think they run everything find out different." Ashford studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, calculation replacing casual. "Menace, good day, Mrs. Thornfield, Mr. Thornfield." He touched his hat brim again. "Think about my offer. Might not come again." The three riders disappeared down the trail, dust rising in their wake. Zeke and Magnolia stood on the porch until the hoofbeats faded. "You just made an enemy." "I made an enemy the day I married you." Magnolia turned to face him. "The question is what we do about it." That afternoon, they rode to the North Canyon. Magnolia sat her horse with easy grace, her eyes scanning the landscape. She'd traded the patched dress for men's work clothes, her hair braided back under an old hat. The canyon was a natural funnel, walls of red stone rising on both sides. Good grazing at the bottom, sweet grass and a spring that never ran dry. Also the perfect place to drive stolen cattle without being seen. "There," Magnolia pointed to fresh tracks in the soft earth. 5 horses 2 days old, leading a string of cattle south. Zeke dismounted, studied the sign. She was right. The tracks told a clear story of organized theft. "Where does this canyon lead?" "Connects to the main trail about 5 miles south. From there, you could drive cattle anywhere." Zeke's voice was grim. "No way to track them once they hit that road." They followed the tracks until the trail went cold on hard ground. By evening, they were back at the ranch, no closer to catching the thieves but certain of their method. Jeremiah met them at the barn. "Lost 2 more today, from the east pasture this time. They're changing patterns." Magnolia unsaddled her. Horse with practiced movements, getting bolder. Or more desperate. Zeke hung up his tack. Ashford made us an offer today. Jeremiah's face went still. What kind of offer? The kind that comes with consequences if you refuse. That night, Magnolia worked by lamplight again, sketching maps and marking trails. Zeke sat across from her, cleaning his rifle with slow, methodical strokes. "We need to set a trap," she said finally. "Dangerous thinking. More dangerous, too. Sit here and let them bleed us dry." Her pencil traced the canyon walls on her rough map. "They think we're helpless. A failing rancher and a city woman who doesn't know better." Maybe they're right. Magnolia looked up from her papers. In the lamplight, her face was all sharp angles and determined shadows. "Then we prove them wrong." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and moaning through the eaves. Storm weather coming. The kind that stripped away pretense and left only what mattered. Zeke watched his wife bend over her plans, calculating odds and plotting. Strategy. 3 days ago, she'd been a stranger. Now she was the only thing standing between him and complete ruin. The only thing worth fighting for. The harvest dance invitation arrived on cream-colored paper, delivered by the preacher's wife, with sympathetic eyes and careful words. The whole town would be there. Every family that mattered, every voice that whispered behind gloved hands. Magnolia held the invitation against the lamplight, reading between the elegant script. A test. A chance for Copper Creek to measure the strange woman who'd married Zeke Thornfield in a torn wedding dress. "We don't have to go." Zeke's voice carried from the kitchen doorway. "Yes, we do." She folded the paper with precise creases. "Running makes us look guilty of something." "Guilty of what?" "Being different." The next morning brought news that carved deeper wounds. The banker, Mr. Pemberton, rode out with papers fresh from his safe. The foreclosure date had moved up 2 weeks, some technicality about missed interest payments. Ashford's work, clean and legal and devastating. Magnolia watched Pemberton's buggy disappear down the trail, dust settling behind him. 14 days now. The number sat in her chest like a stone. "We'll set the trap tomorrow night," she said. "Too dangerous. More dangerous to wait." She turned to face Zeke, her green eyes steady. "They're closing the noose. Time to bite back." That evening, they planned their ambush. The thieves always struck during the new moon, when darkness was complete. Tomorrow night would be perfect for them. Perfect for an ambush, too. Jeremiah would hide in the rocks above the canyon. Zeke would wait at the narrow end where the cattle had to pass. Magnolia would stay at the ranch, ready to ride for the sheriff if things went wrong. "I should be up there with you," she said. "This isn't Boston Tea Party planning." Zeke's voice was rough. "These men won't hesitate to shoot." "Neither will I." The words hung between them, honest and hard. Zeke studied her face in the firelight, seeing something new there. Not the desperate woman from the train platform. Someone forged by necessity and sharpened by loss. Saturday arrived gray and cold, wind driving clouds across the mountains. Magnolia spent the morning pressing her one good dress, the blue wool she'd saved from Boston. It was plain but well made, the color of deep water. She braided her hair with careful fingers, pinned it up with her mother's silver combs. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a rancher's wife, someone who belonged. The dance was held in the church hall, lanterns strung between the rafters. Music spilled from the open doors, fiddle and guitar weaving melodies that spoke of harvest home and winter's approach. Zeke helped her down from the wagon, his hand steady at her waist. He'd borrowed a clean shirt from Jeremiah, combed his hair back with water. Together they looked respectable, ordinary. The music faltered when they entered. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes tracked their movement across the floor, measuring and cataloging every detail. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, approached with a smile sharp as cut glass. "Magnolia, dear. How lovely to finally meet you properly. Mrs. Henderson. Magnolia inclined her head with perfect politeness. Such an interesting story, yours. Married the same day you met. The words carried clearly across the quiet space. How very romantic. Some folks know what they want when they see it. Zeke's arm tightened around Magnolia's waist. Indeed, Mrs. Henderson's gaze swept Magnolia from head to toe. And what exactly did you see, Mr. Thornfield? The question was a blade wrapped in silk. Around them, the hall had gone completely quiet. Even the musicians waited. Magnolia felt the weight of every stare, the calculation behind every smile. These people had already decided what she was: desperate, unwanted, a charity case in borrowed respectability. I saw a woman who could make something from nothing. Zeke's voice carried to every corner of the hall. Who could turn a house into a home? Who had the backbone to fight for what mattered? How poetic. Mrs. Henderson's tone could have frozen water. And what did you see, dear? Magnolia met her stare without flinching. A man who keeps his word. Who works an honest day for an honest dollar. Who judges people by their actions, not their circumstances. The silence stretched taut as wire. Then the fiddle started again, tentative at first, then stronger. Conversations resumed in careful murmurs. Mrs. Henderson drifted away to spread her poison elsewhere. Other women approached with questions wrapped in false concern. Where was she from? What was her family background? How did she find herself on that train platform? Each question was a small cut, designed to bleed slowly. Magnolia answered with quiet dignity, giving nothing that could be twisted into fresh gossip. The evening crawled past in measured doses of polite cruelty. Zeke stayed close, his presence a steady warmth against the chill of unwelcome. When someone made a comment about hasty marriages or unfortunate circumstances, his jaw would tighten, but he kept his voice level. Near midnight, young Tommy Morrison, full of whiskey and his father's importance, cornered them by the punch bowl. His words slurred together, but his meaning was clear enough. Heard you got yourself a real bargain, Thornfield. Damaged goods. Come cheap, I suppose. Zeke went very still. His hand dropped from Magnolia's waist. Tommy, his voice was winter quiet. You're drunk, go home. Just making conversation. Tommy swayed on his feet, emboldened by alcohol and audience. We're all curious about the fat bride nobody wanted. The words hit Magnolia in the chest, each one a fresh humiliation. Around them, the crowd had gone quiet again, sensing blood. In the water, Zeke stepped forward, his fists clenched. Apologize. Now. For what? Speaking truth? The blow came fast and clean, Zeke's knuckles connecting with Tommy's jaw. The younger man went down hard, blood streaming from his split lip. The truth is, she's worth 10 of you. Zeke's voice cut through the sudden uproar. Any man here got a problem with that can take it up with me. No one moved. No one spoke. Tommy groaned on the floor, his father rushing to help him up. Zeke offered Magnolia his arm. Ready to go home, Mrs. Thornfield. They walked through the silent crowd, heads high, dignity intact. Outside, the cold air bit at their faces, clean after the stifling atmosphere of judgment and whispers. In the wagon, Magnolia finally spoke. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. They rode home under stars sharp as broken glass, the silence between them different now, warmer, full of things that didn't need words. At the ranch, Zeke helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered at her waist, his face close to hers in the darkness. I meant what I said in there. Which part? All of it. His thumb traced the line of her cheek. You're the strongest person I know. She leaned into his touch, this man who'd fought for her honor in a room full of enemies. And you're the most decent. He kissed her then, soft and careful, her back against the wagon wheel. She tasted of punch and possibility, of futures neither had dared imagine a week ago. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The space between them hummed with new understanding. Tomorrow they would set their trap. Tomorrow they would fight for their land, their livelihood, their chance at something real. Tonight they had each other. The cattle drive began before dawn, mist clinging to the valley floor. 41 head of cattle, everything they had left. The last desperate gamble to raise the money before foreclosure. Magnolia sat her horse at the edge of the herd, her rifle across her saddle. The plan was simple. Drive the cattle to Denver, sell them at market prices instead of accepting Ashford's lowball offers. 3 days hard riding through mountain passes that could kill them all. Storm coming, Jeremiah said, his eyes on the darkening sky. Can smell it in the wind. Zeke nodded grimly. Early October snow in the high country meant death for man and beast alike. But waiting meant losing everything anyway. We ride. The first day went smooth as butter. Cattle moved well, no stragglers, no problems. They made good time through the lower valleys, following old Indian trails that Jeremiah knew from his Army days. Magnolia rode point, her eyes scanning ahead for trouble. She'd proven herself a natural cattlewoman, reading the herd's mood, anticipating problems before they started. Zeke found himself watching her more than the trail, admiring the way she sat her horse, the quiet confidence in her movements. That night they camped in a sheltered hollow, the cattle bedded down in tall grass. Magnolia cooked beans and bacon over a small fire while the men stood guard. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of snow from the peaks above. "How much further?" she asked. 20 miles. Maybe 25, Zeke studied the sky. If the weather holds, it didn't. The storm hit just after midnight, wind howling down from the mountains with teeth of ice and snow. The cattle stirred restlessly, lowing in the darkness. Zeke and Jeremiah moved among them, speaking in low voices, trying to keep the herd calm. By dawn, 6 inches of wet snow covered everything. The trail ahead disappeared into a white maze of valleys and ridges. Worse, the cattle were spooked, bunching together and rolling their eyes at every sound. "We should turn back," Jeremiah said. "No." Magnolia's voice cut through the wind. "We're closer to Denver than home. Push through." They pushed. Through snow that got deeper with every mile. Through wind that cut through wool and leather to chill the bone. The cattle moved. Slowly, reluctantly, but they moved. Then the riders appeared. 4 men on horseback, coming fast from the south. Ashford's men, Zeke realized. They'd been waiting, watching for this moment when the herd was vulnerable in the open. "Scatter them," one of the riders shouted. They came in shooting, not at the people but over the cattle's heads. The sharp cracks echoed off the canyon walls, turning the herd into a stampeding mass of fear and fury. Zeke spurred his horse forward, trying to turn the leaders, but it was too late. The cattle were running blind, heading straight for a cliff edge half a mile ahead. Magnolia rode hard to the right, cutting off part of the herd, saving what she could. Jeremiah worked the left flank, his horse dancing through the chaos. But too many were already committed to the deadly path. In the confusion, Magnolia's horse stumbled in a hidden gully. She went down hard, rolling in the snow as her mount scrambled to its feet. The last Zeke saw was her blue coat disappearing into the swirling white. The stampede played out in minutes. 18 head over the cliff, their bodies broken on the rocks below. The survivors scattered across 5 miles of rough country, some probably lost forever. Zeke and Jeremiah spent hours gathering what cattle they could find, 23 head instead of 41. Not enough to pay the bank. Not enough to save anything, and no sign of Magnolia. They searched until full dark, calling her name into the wind. Jeremiah found tracks leading into a narrow canyon, but snow covered them quickly. By morning, there would be no trail to follow. "She's dead," Jeremiah said quietly. "Nobody survives a night like this without shelter." Zeke sat his horse in the growing darkness, staring at the place where his wife had vanished. 3 weeks married. 3 weeks of hope and partnership and something that might have been love. Gone. All of it gone. But Magnolia wasn't dead. She was standing in a hidden cave, her hands shaking as she lit a match and held it high. The flame revealed rough stone walls, old mining equipment, and something that made her heart race. Fresh tool marks. Recent excavation. Ashford's men had been here, and recently. She lit a pine torch from her saddlebags and explored deeper. The cave opened into a natural chamber, then a worked tunnel that burrowed into the mountain's heart. Everywhere she looked, she saw signs of recent activity. Then she found the silver ore. Chunks of it lay scattered near a pile of mining tools. Raw silver, rich enough to make a man wealthy beyond dreams. This was what Ashford really wanted, not their cattle. Not their water rights. The mineral wealth buried beneath their land. Everything made sense now. The cattle thefts designed to weaken them financially. The early foreclosure to force a quick sale. The armed men ready to scatter their herd when they tried to save themselves. Ashford knew about the silver, had probably known for months. Magnolia. Filled her pockets with ore samples, memorized the layout of the tunnel, counted the mining equipment, evidence, proof of what was really happening. But first she had to survive the night, and find her way back to Zeke before he did something desperate. The torch burned low as she made her plans. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cave was warm and dry. Safe, her horse had followed. Her into the entrance, nickering softly in the darkness. She had food for 2 days, water from snowmelt. And now she had the weapon they needed to fight back. The question was whether there would be anything left to fight for when the storm finally ended. Miles away, Zeke sat by a dying fire, his face carved from stone. The remaining cattle huddled nearby, their breath steaming in the cold air. Tomorrow they would have to start the long journey home, to face the bank, to admit defeat, to live with the knowledge that his desperate gamble had cost him everything, including the woman who'd become his whole world in 3 short weeks. The snow fell harder, erasing tracks and hope with equal efficiency. By morning, the mountains would be clean and white and empty of all the dreams that had died in the storm. But deep in her hidden cave, Magnolia Pearl Thornfield planned her next move. Silver ore heavy in her pockets, determination burning brighter than any torch. The game wasn't over yet. Magnolia rode into the ranch yard 3 days later, her horse exhausted, her clothes torn from fighting through mountain brush. The silver ore in her saddlebags clinked with each step. Zeke stood frozen by the corral, his face going through a dozen emotions: relief, joy, disbelief. Then he was running, catching her as she slid from the saddle. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet." She leaned into his strength, feeling the solid reality of him. "We need to talk, now." Inside, she spread the ore samples across the kitchen table. The silver caught the lamplight, throwing bright reflections on the wooden walls. "This is what Ashford really wants." Her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "There's a whole mining operation in that canyon, fresh equipment, recent excavation." Zeke picked up a chunk of ore, felt its weight. "How much is down there?" "Enough to buy half the territory." Magnolia pulled out her sketched maps. "The main vein runs right under our north pasture. Ashford's been mining it in secret. That's why he wanted us gone. That's why he needs us gone. Mining claims require proper surveys, legal filings. Can't do that while we own the land." A knock at the door interrupted them. Heavy, demanding, the kind of knock that came with bad news. Ashford stood on the porch, flanked by 2 of his men. But something was different now. His usual confidence had cracked, replaced by something harder, more desperate. "Thornfield. Heard your wife made it back safely. Amazing what folks can survive when they're determined. What do you want, Ashford? To discuss your situation." The bank's being very patient, but patience has limits. His eyes found Magnolia through the doorway. Perhaps we could speak privately. My wife hears everything I hear. Ashford's smile went cold. Very modern of you. Well then, Mrs. Thornfield, perhaps you can talk sense into your husband. The foreclosure stands, tomorrow at noon. Unless we pay the full amount, $800. In cash. Ashford's tone said he knew they didn't have it. Of course. My offer still stands. $400 for the whole spread. Magnolia stepped onto the porch, the ore samples hidden in her apron pocket. Interesting math, Mr. Ashford. $400 for land that's worth thousands. Worth is what someone's willing to pay. True. She pulled out the largest chunk of silver ore. What would you pay for this? Ashford went very still. His eyes fixed on the ore, and Magnolia saw the exact moment he realized his secret was blown. Pretty rock. Where'd you find it? In a mine tunnel. Under our north pasture. Along with picks and shovels and equipment that looked fairly new. The silence stretched tight as wire. One of Ashford's men shifted nervously, his hand drifting toward his gun. Seems to me, Magnolia continued, that anyone mining on another man's land without permission might be breaking some laws. Theft, maybe. Trespassing, certainly. You can't prove anything. Can't I? She pulled out her sketched maps, the careful drawings she'd made in the cave. Tunnel. Layouts, equipment inventory. Even some interesting initials carved in the support beams. Be a ring any bells? Ashford's face had gone white beneath his tan. You're bluffing. Am I? Should we ride into town and ask Sheriff Morrison to take a look? He's always interested in mining claims that haven't been properly filed. The sheriff won't believe you. Maybe not. But the Territorial Mining Office will. Especially when they see the ore samples and survey maps. Magnolia's voice never wavered. Amazing what a woman can remember when she sets her mind to it. Ashford looked between them, calculating odds. His men were watching him, waiting for orders. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then voices came from the direction of town. Riders approaching fast. Sheriff Morrison and 3 deputies, their badges catching the afternoon sun. Expecting company, Ashford? Zeke asked. The sheriff reined up, his face grim. Bartholomew Ashford. You're under arrest for illegal mining operations and cattle theft. On what evidence? On the evidence Mrs. Thornfield brought to my office this morning. Morrison's tone was flat, professional. Seems she rode to town before coming home. Showed me some very interesting maps and ore samples. Magnolia had played her cards perfectly. Gone to the authorities first, established the official record before confronting Ashford. Given him enough rope to hang himself with his own words. Ashford's men were already reaching for their guns when Morrison's deputies drew on them. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The surrender came quietly. Ashford in handcuffs, his men disarmed and mounted under guard. Justice served. With mountain efficiency. What about the foreclosure? Zeke asked. Funny thing about that, Morrison said. Bank president seems to have developed a sudden understanding attitude. Something about not wanting to be associated with illegal mining operations. Ashford's last desperate play had failed. His influence, his threats, his careful plans, all crumbling under the weight of evidence and law. 6 months later, the Thornfield ranch had expanded to cover 3,000 acres. The silver mine, properly surveyed and legally filed, provided enough income to buy out their neighbors and improve the property. More importantly, the couple who'd married as strangers had become partners in every sense. Love had grown slowly, rooted in respect and nurtured by shared struggle. Magnolia stood on the platform at Copper Creek Station, watching the afternoon train discharge its passengers. A young woman sat alone on a trunk, tears streaming down her face. Her traveling dress was wrinkled, her hat askew. Another abandoned. Bride, another woman facing an uncertain future in an unforgiving land. Magnolia walked over slowly, her steps careful and unthreatening. "Miss, are you all right?" The woman looked up with eyes full of despair. "I was supposed to marry Mr. Jenkins. He said I wasn't what he expected." Sometimes what we expect and what we need are different things. Magnolia sat beside her on the trunk. "I'm Magnolia Thornfield. That's my husband over there by the wagon." "Sarah Mitchell." The woman wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "I don't know what to do now." "Well, Sarah Mitchell, it happens I know a very decent man who's been looking for a wife. Runs a good farm about 10 miles east. Works hard, treats folks fair, and judges people by their character instead of their circumstances." Sarah's eyes widened. "You'd help me?" "Someone helped me once, on this very platform." Magnolia smiled, remembering her own desperate day. "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually the beginning of something better." She stood, offered her hand to the crying woman. "Come on, let's go home and figure out your future." Behind them, the train pulled away in a cloud of steam and possibility. Ahead lay the mountains, vast and challenging, and full of promise for those brave enough to claim it. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.